Prior to this album coming out, he's selling out stadiums.
Yeah.
Album comes out, and I think it does maybe 55,000. You would think for an act this big, the number would be bigger. This is evidence that labels are buying streams.
I mean,
DIY.
DIYers, this week I saw a conversation between Andrew Schultz and Charlamagne the God. They were talking a little bit about Charlamagne's comments about how Drake's single with SZA is not quite hitting the way you would expect a Drake song to hit. But also in the midst of this conversation, the subject of album sales came up, and Charlamagne, being somebody who's obviously been in radio for a very long time, said some really interesting things about, I guess you can say, the possibility that these record labels are manipulating, allegedly, album sales.
I'm saying that can be so easily taken out. And the cool thing about that is, like, it felt like Offset was a fan of Kai and aware of the culture, and he was in on it. He wasn't begrudgingly doing an interview. He was there like, yo, we're gonna create some moments and this is good. And the same thing is kind of happening with this. So he's aware of internet culture.
I wonder if that stuff translates into record sales and stuff.
So I've been meaning to ask you about this. Maybe we discussed it already. If we discussed it already, my bad. But Burna Boy, right? Has an album that comes out. Prior to this album coming out, he's selling out stadiums.
Yeah.
Album comes out, and I think it does maybe 55,000 or something like that.
In America, yeah.
And it was America or global?
Doja Cat was 55,000. I forgot how much Burna Boy was.
I would look, but you would think for an act this big that the number would be bigger. And I think it was Russ who said, this is evidence that labels are buying streams.
I mean,
somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
it's not really a truth bomb. We kind of figured that already. But I think it's really interesting to hear this conversation be so fluid and be so public. This is no new thing to the music industry, especially when you think about things like payola, how records were spun and distributed amongst radio stations way back in the music industry days. However, Andrew makes a really interesting point in that Burna Boy, who's obviously an extension of that one video that we made about how record labels are deprioritizing rappers in place of Afrobeat artists. Well, one of the artists that I mentioned was actually Burna Boy. He has been absolutely dominating here in the States. But if you can sell out a stadium, how is it that you only sell 55,000 copies of your album in the same place where you're selling out one singular date in a stadium?
When I say things like, yo, you see a song and the song might hit number one, you don't really feel it. Like, all I'm saying is nowadays...
You can buy a number one, is what you're saying. Now, back in the day...
You can manipulate a number
Back in the day, you could also buy a number one and manipulate a number one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And this is the number one thing that the record labels want. What they want is control of the outcome of their projects. Right? That's why they had the labels and the connections to you guys, and they were trying to do payola back in the day. For people who don't know, they were trying to pay off DJs to play records, and because they feel if you can get a record out there enough, it can reach escape velocity and then be good. Now with streaming, for a moment with SoundCloud and all those rappers, they had no control, and they're freaking out. Now it looks like if you can buy streams and you can make a number one go, anybody can be quote unquote number one, but we don't know if it's actually real. And this Burna Boy thing is evidence. Like, this guy has stadiums sold out, and if he's doing 55K, something's off, no?
Duh.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Is that not insane to you? Sales, as we're speaking about in the context of 55,000, if that is indeed the number, I think there might have been a mix-up with Doja Cat. If those are just, let's say, in the United States, that's not a proper representation of the influence of an artist like Burna Boy. So you're going to have a whole lot more sales that are accounted for outside of just the U.S. However, the point is still the point. If you have the ability as an artist, no matter who you are and where you're from, if you have the ability to sell out a stadium, obviously we know that the habits of listeners has shifted, but something about that number just feels very weird. My spotty senses started tingling as I heard this, and I'm starting to think like, how would this be beneficial for the system as is? Well, for one, I think it's already ridiculous, as Andrew's pointing out, that here you are, $1 million company, and we know that companies don't play fair. Here you are, billion dollar industry, I should say, and you still have to put cheat codes in. Fam, I hate to tell you, I hate to burst your bubble. This is wrestling. The music industry as you have known it, if nobody else has ever told you, the one that you want to get into and change is wrestling. You just haven't met Vince McMahon yet.
And I say this to Cardi all the time. If I was Cardi, I would never drop another album.
2 singles?
I would single the game to death because I don't know if people care about whole bodies of work.
I understand where Charlamagne is coming from. I think you can make a strong case for what he's saying, but I also feel like that narrative is pushed by the very same people that may be hiding or fudging these numbers because they know that their money is in quantity and not the quality of a singular project. Yes, we know that so much has shifted in the way that we listen to music. That is an obvious thing. But I think that this idea that people just don't have a desire for a full body of work, I think it's bullshit.
If you're Kendrick Lamar, you could put out a whole body of work because Kendrick don't put out a lot of music.
People to care about the body of work.
That's right.
But
That's
if you are somebody who just puts out singles, it's not a cohesive unit. I agree with you, and you can hold culture for longer.
That's right.
My question is this. So, yes, they use Kendrick Lamar as an example. What does Kendrick Lamar do differently from all these other artists that were mentioned, from the Playboy Cardis? I think that he takes his time with his music and makes no excuse for it. He's not always in your face, so that when he does choose to show up for another album campaign, it feels special. The music that he puts together feels like it is well thought out. Usually he's working with about 30 plus musicians just to put together this work. I feel like all of these are things that any artist has the ability to do with time and the proper team. But I feel like the reason why you have artists that lean more into streaming is because they're fucking lazy. And I say that as a rapper myself, as an artist myself. I think that because there are certain rappers who feel probably overwhelmed by all the responsibilities, all the places they must be, it's a reason why some of these rappers outsource songwriters. I look at a lot of these artists and I feel like just because we're getting a lot of music from them doesn't necessarily mean that they're working harder. I just think that that's the easy way out, in my opinion. This is my humble opinion. You may feel differently. I feel like quantity without taking your time to ensure quality. One, you're moving and you're grinding scared. They'll never say that. Two, you're pushing brute force at a problem and then looking around and wondering why the circumstances around you are changing, why the environment and the sales are changing, why the streaming is changing, why people are not buying your concert tickets. Well, look at the way that you've treated your product.
Low key, you know who did this? 6ix9ine.
Yeah.
6ix9ine was doing song.
I think
And the songs were charting. And it wasn't until he dropped an album that I think it didn't do as well or whatever. But still, it's like you had culture when you were dropping songs.
I think there's album artists. Some artists are just built for albums. And then I think there's single stars. You know what I mean? And I think that might even be the case with Doja Cat. Doja had a great rollout. Paint the Town Red was #1. It's #2 this week. And it's you could tell Paint the Town Red is a real #1 record. You hear it, you know people up with that record. But her album only sold 55,000 copies.
Maybe that's the real number, like that 55,000, around that ballpark.
I imagine if that is indeed the real number, as he's alluding to, that makes it close to impossible, unless you can justify on the other end what you're doing with the streaming, what the ad revenue is doing with the music videos, what the shows are doing. It makes it close to impossible for an artist to renegotiate a fair deal after this first campaign. Music producers, rappers, and singers, are you looking to get some constructive feedback on your newest music? Joining Critique My Beats is super easy. All you gotta do is reserve a pass to critiquemybeats.com. Click on book a slot and choose if you wanna get 1 beat review, 2 beat reviews on our live stream every Monday. Best beat and best song of the night is going to win a cash prize. Join us at critiquemybeats.com.
Everything else is probably inflated.
Or maybe the 55,000 is the real number for the album. But the single, people just like singles. Like, people might just want to hear a song. Like, they might not want to hear the whole body of work.
Well, my question is, would you want to hear a whole body of work from somebody who's giving you half a body of a song, a half-ass music video, but it's catchy? Would you want to go see a movie if it didn't have the proper cinematic coloring? If the soundtrack for the trailer was incomplete? If the actors kind of said their lines, but they were kind of mumbling? Would you want to go see that movie? Which is really, when you think about it, the same kind of interaction that a music fan has. I heard your snippet. I heard the catchiest part of your snippet on TikTok. You know what? I want to go check this song out. That is one commitment. Song's kind of catchy. I'm kind of feeling it right now. A whole album from you, though? Whoa there.
You need to slow down.
And it's so unfortunate because I think that these artists could be capable of doing so much more. But because they're in the music business and there are people, keep the suits out the booth, who are encouraging them to push music at an all-time high, as if these human beings are already AI. This is the shit that we get left with.
Al's going, what is a metric for success? And if a major artist gets 55K, and then Doja dropped and it got 55K, who's also a major artist, you go, maybe that's what success is. When we were growing up, it was 1 million, right? It went platinum. Now, and then it started to fluctuate, and I think we came to an understanding like between 100 and 200 is really successful. Maybe it's more like 55, and then a lot of things have been bought, or they're selling those like package things.
The merch and all that.
Yeah.
But even with somebody like Doja, I know Doja can probably still sell out a venue.
Easy.
You know? And we know Burna Boy definitely still selling out arenas all over the country.
That's the tricky thing, because the hardest thing to do is get people to come out to your show. It is not hard to get people to click a link and then watch or listen to your music. That's easy. Getting people to put clothes on, get a babysitter, get in the fucking Uber, right? Buy all those tickets. That's hard.
And we got to stop, like, that's what I mean when I be saying, and we know when people
I'm sorry, Charlotte.
Care about a song.
I'm sorry. You're telling me that Burna Boy put 80,000 people in a stadium and only 55,000 of those people that came out to see him bought his album?
That's what I'm saying.
Something's off.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I mean, they're telling you right to your face. I know there's a lot of narratives, ladies and gentlemen, that are out here that tell us about the supposed habits of listeners nowadays. But do we ever fact check when these conversations are had in front of us? Not this one in particular, but when these stats are telling us, these narratives that, not even directly, these narratives that are pushed out here that people don't listen. Yeah, people, you know what? People don't buy albums anymore. I think of that and I say, where does a conversation like that get started? And who benefits off of a conversation like that? Interesting enough, it seems like the same major labels we're having a conversation about, they seem like they would be the ones that benefit the most. Just think about this from a real estate standpoint. If I sign you, I sign you, I sign you, I sign you. You do an album, I have to wait 6 months for your album, 12 months because you got a live band, another year for you because you're going through some mental health issues. You over there, maybe you can do it in 3 months. I gotta wait to reap the benefits off of my investment. However, if I can get you to put out 12 singles over the next 2 months, you put out 13 singles over the next 2 weeks, you put out a whole album's worth of singles. That's what it seems like the labels are doing to albums. They're breaking down all of the components of an album. A song that's a street banger, a song that's a club banger, a song that's a relationship song. And they're just spreading it amongst week by week, just checking off boxes. But you're gonna tell me that they don't benefit off of a narrative like, well, people just don't want albums anymore. Let me show you something real quick. Right here is a YouTuber named Waveman.
The Waveman, man.
But he makes an interesting point about what happens sometimes after that first album, quote unquote, flops, or the numbers get hidden. When that first album flops, what happens to the artists and the budgets that they once had?
Idea of artists falling off is kind of taboo to me, right? Because it's like the labels' budgets fall off, right?
First line on them, first line.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
One more time, he said artists don't fall off. The artists' labels' budgets fall off.
That push ain't there no more. Case in point, man, look at a first album from a new upcoming artist. They're doing everything in the book. They're pulling out the blogs. They're pulling out random gifts from celebrities, cosigns, every single feature. First album, lit. Second album, coming out with an EP, no features. One songwriter wrote the whole EP. They don't even got budgets for the producers and writers anymore, bro. They're gonna pull out all the stops for the first album, but I'm gonna see if they got their return on investment from that first album, by how they treat that second one.
Here's the new wrinkle to add to this conversation. So much of what we as a consumer, as artists ourselves, I'm doing a lot of unlearning. There's a lot of narratives that I've had to like unlearn as I advance my own career. There's a lot of narratives that I have to ask, where did those come from and why are they pushed? And who actually benefits if this gets out there and people start to echo it? It's very interesting that when you see an artist gain momentum and folks start accusing them of being industry plants, when you see an artist start to really get motion and get looks that you're like, damn, they got all the legends around them, arms around them, right? Showing like, yo, this person's up next. You can see it. You can almost smell it. You know, like, oh, this is the next one. Some may even call them industry plants. That's another subject for another day. But it's interesting when you see them get the ultimate support system. Folks at these labels can make conversations that artist to artist can't get a return call on. So they call in all the favors. And these artists show up, they share the project, they give them the quote unquote cosign, even if they know the artist or not, they give the cosign, and then that artist skyrockets up and they get the best push that money can buy. However, when the labels say that the numbers didn't show up the way that they expected, it changes the negotiation because you are automatically in debt when you try to go in there and renegotiate your next project. Now all of a sudden, that second full-length album you wanted to do, we think you should pivot and probably just work on an EP. Matter of fact, we think you should lay low for a little bit. right? I think you've been too accessible. The people have gotten too much of you. And all of a sudden you are off the map for 3 to 4 months as complete fucking strangers can tell everybody how much you fell off. That is an unfair game. That to me sounds like a game in which we never ask who are all the players in it. Because if we ask that question, then we would also hold accountable the same labels that put that push before, that gave that full red carpet treatment to the first project. On the second project, where are you at? When you have these companies that simply treat these artists like pieces of property, pieces of real estate, why would they care? Why would they care? I think you're worth more than that. DIYers, I think that you can create value amongst whatever product that you want. If you want to work on albums, you're not going to become an album artist by working on singles. Now, if you're looking at this from just the buyer standpoint, and you want to figure out a way to make as much money off of whatever music people want, there's a system that you can do that with. However, if you want to make the art that you want to make, it is important for you to first make it and then come up with a proper game plan on how to market it. Not only is it the DIY era, but it is time to unlearn these things. Those are my thoughts though, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think.
DIY.
DIYers, if you enjoyed this content, make sure that you hit the like button and maybe even consider subscribing. Come on, man. Stop being greedy. Peace.